you get really close to the action. It's not difficult to get, it is very difficult to get into Baikonur, but once you've got the permits and once everything is sorted, you get really close to the action. And I've seen launches in the US where there's no way they would let visitors get this close to the actual hardware. So once you're in Baikonur, you're in, and you get to see everything. And this is pretty cool to see the rocket, the traditional rocket rollout that started with Gagarin. In 6 o'clock in the morning, they roll out the rocket a few days before the launch, just like Gagarin's rocket, which was the same model. This is a Soyuz that was launched, this picture's from 2014, that launched Alexander Gerst to the ISS with his crew. The rocket, although it has been going through continuous development, this is still the basic model that Yuri Gagarin used, and in fact that Sputnik used in 1957. And you get really close to it. Really cool to see this early in the morning on a big train, the complete Soyuz rocket stack rolling from the assembly building to the launch pad. Great way for great selfies. I mean, where in the world can you take selfies like this? So great opportunities. I use this picture quite a bit, as you can imagine. And here she goes. And this is this picture from 2014. I used it to advertise this event. Alexander Gerst rocket rolling to Launchpad 1. There's lots of launch pads in Baikonur now, but Launchpad 1 is the one that was used by Yuri Gagarin. And I don't know if you can see it, but in the lower right-hand corner, it says in Russian Gagarin Start. And that is the name they've given to Launchpad 1 that is still in use for crewed launches today. And this is quite an emotional moment. If you're there for the first time, or well, even if you're there for the second or third time, it's as a space geek, this is holy ground. Entering the gate to Launchpad 1, that's as it says here on the sign, is quite emotional. Things have changed a little bit, but the location and the way the pad is structured and is built is still roughly the same as what it was all the way in the beginning. So once the rocket has arrived at the pad, they will use this special train carriage to put it upright. And well, as you can see from the position where I've taken the photo, they let you see all these things from really, really close by. Once the rocket is upright, you see the gantry is still open, the service gantry, but they close it, and then it only is reopened just before launch. You also see, and that's what I found interesting, and it was actually one of the astronauts who was there who told me that, you see the rocket is green, but when you see the launch footage, the rocket is white. And I wonder if anyone knows why that is. I'll come back to that later, but I'll let you puzzle on that for a little bit. So this is the gantry closing. And this is roughly 2 or 3 days before the launch, 2 days before the launch, I believe, when the rocket is unfueled. It's basically an empty tube, but they're closing it and getting it ready for launch. And again, you can get really close. It's really cool to be able to take pictures like these so close to the action. Another thing that you will only see in Russia, as far as I'm aware anyway, is before a rocket flies, it has to be blessed. So this is Father Sergei, the head of the local church, the Orthodox Church, who always comes out once the rocket has been placed on the pad and the gantry has been closed. They bring in the priest with his holy water. You can see his assistant carrying a plastic bottle with holy water, and the priest is then called in, and the crew and the family is there. And the rocket is blessed in the traditional Orthodox way with a swab with water. And after the rocket has been blessed, the priest is very happy to also bless the assembled press. So everybody watch out for your camera, and he throws water on you, which in summer is not bad. In winter, it can be very freezing. Right next to the launch pad is a museum. And a museum very close to these traditional launch pads must have the best stuff in the world, and it really does. This is the museum in building 2. So building 1 or zone 1 is the launch pad. Building 2 is the museum, and everything that falls back into the step or didn't launch or was used to test things is collected here. So the Boron space shuttle that you see here, as many of us know, is the Russian equivalent or the Soviet equivalent of the American space shuttle. They've built quite a few of them. They've built more Russian shuttles than they've built American shuttles, but only one actually flew. And that model is still on the Cosmodrome in Baikonur, but it's not this one. This is one of the engineering models, full scale, full size engineering models that was used, and that's now parked permanently in the garden of the museum. But you also see random rocket parts scattered around the grounds here. And of course, the best stuff is inside. In Russia, they like to put their names on everything. They like to sign stuff. So this is part of the rocket fairing that was used for a launch in 2012 when the Olympics were, 2014, when the Winter Olympics were held in Sochi in Russia. And this was part of the launch shroud that depicted the Olympic rings because, I don't know if you remember, but in that launch, the Russian commander brought the Olympic torch on board of the International Space Station and took it back. The launch shroud had the logo on it, and that's depicted here. As I said, they like to sign things. It's a tradition ever since the beginning that crews sign all kinds of things. They sign the doors in their hotel. You may have seen that in launch footage, but also they visit the museum here, and they sign the poster of the Soyuz rocket. And when the poster is full, they put a new poster in and they collect more autographs. So all the autographs that you see here are the space crews ready to go to space that sign the poster before they go. And I don't know if you can see, but the signature in the lower right-hand corner is from Alexander Gerst, the European astronaut with the German passport, as Jan Werner always says it, who signed this in May 2014, just a few days before his flight. The museum has a lot of interesting stuff, and it really has way too much to show you all of it. And this is not a museum visit, but this is one of the dummies that they launched, and they have a series of them. One is in the US that was sold in auction in the 1980s or 1990s, but this is another one called Ivan Ivanovich, and these are the dummies that they used before they flew Gagarin, before they flew the first human into space. They flew these test dummies to see if all the systems worked. So they launched them on a rocket, ejected them on the parachute, the same way that the early Vostok system worked with Gagarin, ejected them and see if they landed safely. And this is one of them used in the days, almost literally the days before they launched the first human into space. This is more like a grim reminder of the early days of the Soviet space program. They launched quite a few dogs. Laika was the first one on Sputnik 2. They launched Belka and Strelka, very famous. These are two other dogs. And the reason why these dogs are in this picture is this is the capsule that launched them. And not only did they launch the dogs, they also launched a series of other animals that after they safely returned, which in this case they did, they all survived their trip into space. But when they died of natural causes, or don't know why they died, they brought them into the museum. Well, they stuffed them, brought them into the museum, and put them back in the canister that had launched them. So I don't know if they would do this in every country, but it sure makes for an interesting display. As I said, rocket parts, unlike launches in the US or from French Guiana, rocket parts that fall back after launch do not fall in the ocean and sink to the bottom of the ocean, but they land on land a few hundred kilometers, usually towards the northeast, which is barren wasteland, although there are parts that have been known to fall into habited places, but most of it falls in barren wasteland and is retrieved by the authorities, by the space authorities to do checks on them. So these are various rocket parts that I'm not sure I recognize, but some of you might, but this is scattered around the garden and again makes for an interesting viewing. Boron and As I said, in Russia, you get to see everything from very up close. So they actually let you sit in the cockpit of the spacecraft, and great place for silly selfies. In the meantime, while the tourists like myself in some of these pictures are happily jumping around the Cosmodrome and looking at the history, the crew is in quarantine. And I thought I include this picture because, well, because of what's happening right now, we're all in quarantine in our own special ways. But of course, before spaceflight, both in the US and in China and also in Russia, the crews are kept in quarantine the 2 weeks before they launch, and they keep them in quarantine in a special hotel with a few bungalows behind it on the riverside in the town of Baikonur. And you can't visit them for obvious reasons. So they are in quarantine until the moment they're ready to go to space. And on the day of the launch, there's a series of traditions that these crews go through, one of which, the earliest, is a press conference in their quarantine hotel. So all the press gathers in the hotel where the crew stays in quarantine. So normally you can't enter the hotel, but at the time of this press conference, they let everybody into the hotel. But the cosmonauts will stay behind those glass screens and with a microphone connection can talk to the press and the family and friends of the crew. And as there are not so many tourists going to Baikonur for these launches, there's usually spots for the visitors as well. So here they are, the crew, not just the crew, also the backup crew is always there, because until the moment they get on the bus to the launch pad, the backup crew is there to take their place in case one of the prime crew gets sick, and they talk to the press and get ready to go. So a few last pictures behind glass until they are ready to go. Before they go through quite a few ceremonies. This is one of the ceremonies that the Soyuz crews go through before their quarantine, of course, and that is a tea ceremony at the museum in Baikonur town. And every crew has a picture of them in traditional Kazakh clothes doing the tea ceremony in this special room in the town museum. And if you ask politely, the museum crew, if there's nobody else, will gladly let the tourists do the same tea ceremony wearing the exact same clothes, which again is a nice way of getting close to these strange customs or these interesting traditions that that they have in Russia. So this is me and two of my friends who were visiting them doing the tea ceremony in exactly that same place, wearing those same clothes. In the museum here, again, where they keep various interesting items like this this ILS launch shroud that they retrieved from the steppe, the pointy bits of the Soyuz boosters, a wooden fin. You know, the Soyuz rocket uses wooden fins, so it's a wooden fin, and an original ejection seat from Boron. Interesting collection. There's another place not far from the museum in Baikonur town. It's called the Chilemai School, and it's how would I compare it? It's sort of a technical college for the kids of the space workers that is focused on science and engineering, and obviously on space engineering. And this is a flown Almaz capsule of the TKS system that was connected to the Salyut space stations, which was highly experimental. A few of them have flown. They say that this one has actually flown without crew on a test flight, but it's flown, docked with Salyut and came back to Earth, and is now located here in the school. Pretty cool item to have in a school, if you ask me. And again, if you ask politely, they don't mind if you get on board and form your own crew on board this piece of space history.